Going back to 4351, Ms. Bradford.
Not responding to audience comments because I was prepared for this, but I found it ironic and pleasantly that Twink Barr pointed out that we don't read as well as we could, but policy 4351 says no student under the age of 8 or under grade 3 will be suspended out of school except in response to instances involving violations of policy 4325. 4 reasons. There are only 4 reasons we can suspend children of this age out of school. 4 reasons. Do you know what they are? They are drugs and alcohol. They are assaults and threats. They are weapons, bombs, bomb threats, terrorist threats, clear threats to safety. Did I miss one? Those are grave offenses. And that's the only reason we can suspend a little person out of school. So to say that we need love and understanding and all of these other points, but when a child has a weapon or a bomb threat or a terrorist threat, we need to allow our principals and our superintendent to do their job. And I'm not done. If you look at the law on this, which is General Statute 115C, specifically 288, there's powers and duties of the principal, A, to grade and classify pupils, come all the way down to E, to discipline students and to assign duties to teachers with regard to the discipline, general well-being, and medical care of students. I would say to you that if we have a child who brings a bomb to school or makes a bomb threat or has assaulted or threatened another person or has a gun or drugs and alcohol, then you need to consider that it is in the best interest of the 99 students in the classroom that the one be removed without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. I hear constantly, and I heard in the in the climate survey, that we as a board don't listen to our teachers and our principals enough. And on this one, I'm going with the principals and the superintendent. I'm not interested in changing it to anything else. It's the one part that nobody bothers to read. They read everything else and say before, after, during, whatever. But if you've got a bomb in the school, I don't want to take the time to call the parent while I'm dealing with the child. And I'm sorry if that's offensive, but we have to look after the well-being of our students and our teachers and the rest of the entire school environment. And if a child is threatening something like this or has a weapon or is assaulted or threatened a teacher or a student, no, I'm not going to vote in favor of any more changes to this policy. And I've heard it, this has been on the board 2 years and 2 months, and this is the 3rd time it's come before us.
Thank you. Dr. Merrick?
With respect to my colleagues' concerns about 4351, we have other policies already on the books to deal with a child who has a weapon and whether or not they can be held or whether they can be, bound so that a weapon can be removed. We have policies to protect children and staff that have nothing to do with 4351. Now, 4351 also says a child will not be sent home before the end of the day. So if that's the case, what are we doing with that child? We don't think they're not safe to be with other children, so I'm guessing they're in the principal's office. They are somewhere. So in other words, we have time to talk to the parents. Those children are somewhere being kept so that they are not a danger to themselves or others. And so we have all the time in the world to the end of the day to contact those parents or to try. And if we have to send them home because we haven't yet, we're not going to send them home. A five-year-old, you're going to kick them out of school, go home, little boy? No, we can't do that. So if you cannot contact the parents by the end of the day, you send them home. You're still going to have to call the parents and say, don't send them to school tomorrow. You're going to have a conversation with those parents or guardians. Why in the world wouldn't you have that conversation first? That's all I got to say.
Ms. Justice, Ms. Barnhart, and Mr. Perry.
All right, having been a principal in these situations, I can tell you right now, a lot of it's left, even though this sounds really definite, bomb threats, terrorisms, assaults, a lot of this is interpretation of what goes on in the classroom. It's not that cut and dry. So part of that is so the principal will have to make a decision about what his final outcome will be. You've been there too. And I'm, and we're not even there yet in this discussion, because I'm going to definitely promote, you should be contacting the parents first, because for all you know, that child's brother had been shot the night before when they came in all freaked out. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but there's a lot of factors that you need to put into effect if you're the principal with that responsibility in making these decisions. And that's all we're trying to do, is actually ask to help the principal. It isn't all cut and dry. It isn't all black and white when you talk about 5, 6, 7-year-olds and these kinds of this is what you're supposed to do according to what they do, because what they do is still left up to interpretation.
Ms. Barnhart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to discuss a little bit, because this had come over conversation when I was on policy, and the conversation became about before a decision is made. Mm-hmm. So there was some conversations that I've had with some individuals from Love Our Children about the conversation and parents being brought into the conversation and what's actually happening. So we had discussions about discipline matrix and how that comes into play, how we get our staff feedback, and there's a scaled of if these kind of instances happened, this is the recourse. If this happens, this is the recourse. And there's natural mechanisms built in that address behavior in a scaffolded way of support in hopes that the student's behavior changes to be in a positive direction. That is something we approve constantly. My concern with adding the word before lies in regards to consistent expectation. And in our school district, we should have consistent expectation. We saw overwhelmingly with the staff survey that discipline was one of the biggest concerns for our staff, and not feeling like they're supported in discipline. And I have pointed out and I have criticized, we should not look at the end result and say our staff is doing something wrong, but rather we should say, we trust our staff to follow policy, which is a scaled intervention, intentional consequences when there are specific levels of, rightfully so, disciplinary responses that the school district has, but it's everybody came together to create what that looks like so that we can have consistent expectations. And I hear what my colleague is saying too. I absolutely agree that we have children who are experiencing things that unfortunately I don't believe that children should experience in many instances. But there's still an expectation when they're at school. And so I do hear and understand, but I disagree with my colleague to the left, though, to say you can absolutely call before a child is sent home and have a conversation with a parent, but it can be after the decision is made, because when we start bringing parents into the process of saying, can you help decide what the consequences lie? And I'm not trying to laugh, but when we say, I know my parenting style is different from my friends' parenting styles, and I can only imagine the stories that principals would get to say, well, let me tell you what I think the consequence should be for my child, from the easy extreme to the hard extreme in both directions. And I don't want to see that. I want to have consistent expectations and to be able to support our staff. And I believe that this policy does that. It has a scaled response. It has contact with the parent is absolutely written in here. And so I support this policy.
Mr. Perry.
Being on the policy committee, and we had this discussion about this, and I thought, and I was the one who proposed this language where attempt to contact and as soon as possible, which I think differs from the current thing. It's where it's the end of the day. We're imagining that this needs to happen quickly. I mean, you might need to make a suspension determination right away, but pretty soon after, within minutes maybe, you need to be notifying the parent or attempting to notify the parent. I think all three of us, Ms. Justice and Mr. Wildeboer, and I think Dr. Barnes kind of agreed on the language that we chose. This is why it's a consensus item from policy. We believe this language is the best of all worlds. Would I like some general, just from my own personal thing, would I like to maybe change some of the language about a suspension determination? Can't we just call it a pre-judgment? And then, because right now what we do is there's a suspension determination made, and then the parent gets the right to appeal. But now we're talking semantics, though, really, because they get to appeal if they want to. I mean, could we say they make a predetermination and then there's a real determination after there's a hearing? I don't know, but that's a bigger discussion. I think for right now, right here, right now, I think this is the best language that equals out all of the interests that we have and wanting to be able to reach out to parents as soon as possible during these situations.
Mr. Wildeboer?
No, I've been biting my lip here long enough. So, yeah, I agree with Mr. Perry. He and I were part of that group as well as Ms. Justice. And I will say that I have met with the Love Our Children group repeatedly. And I will say this, I want to keep all our children in school at all times. That's where they learn. That's definitely it. But I've also sat in the principal's chair and had to make those tough decisions when you have a child in front of you that's bleeding because another child has hurt them. When Mr. McManus and I met with the Love Our Children's group, we actually have the wording in our policy that I proposed, and then they came in with the caveats that are in this policy. I'll be honest. I've said when I was a principal, when I was assistant principal, you'd love to have a dime for every parent that came in and said, well, I want to know what you did with the other kid. You can't do that. We can't do that before. You can't have a situation, I don't think, where you have, you can definitely talk to that parent, let the parent know what's going on. But a lot of times a parent will advocate for their child, which they should do. Absolutely, 100%. My child would never do that. Well, I have a child here. Well, can I question that child? No, you can't question that child. I think there's a lot of areas we would get into if we said we have to do that before the determination was made. So I think we need to trust our principals. I think we need to trust our assistant principals. And I think the language that we have right here is the best language that we can come up with. And I think it is sound. I think it's definitely within general statutes. In fact, it's probably a little bit more lenient than general statutes are in certain areas. So I think it is, in my professional opinion. And I think Mr. McManus, I've chatted with him in the past about the same policy, and he also, as a principal, said that this needs to be as it is. So
we are coming up on just about time. I wanted to kind of make a brief comment. I know that we've been discussing this policy for a long time, and in that discussion, we did pull in principals. We did talk to them about what was happening, and more often than not, and actually every principal that I spoke to, they are contacting parents throughout the process. They're already in contact with parents. They're already aware of and communicating with the parents that they can access. We also need to remember that there are parents that we can't access sometimes. They may not have cell phones, or their numbers may have changed, or they may have moved. And so to tie the hands of our principals to that is concerning. So at this point, I will entertain either a motion to continue discussion or a motion to approve.
Motion to continue.
Second.
Oh, gracious, that was at the same time.
Point of order, what's the motion?
Mr. Wildeboer.
I make a motion, we call the question.
Second.
We already had a question here about an
Point of order, he's out of order.
Okay.
Point of order. We have a motion to continue. We have a motion to call. They happened at the same time.
They were simultaneous.
Madam Chair, you'll have to decide.
Right, I am going to go with the motion to approve. And there was a second with that.
If not, I second.
Because we are at time, Ms. Bowie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Perry?
Aye.
Ms. Justice?
No.
Ms. Barnhart?
Yes.
Ms. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Wildebohr? Dr. Merrick?
No.
And Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
All right, that passes 5-2.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to extend discussion for 5 minutes so we can get through the policies for first reading.
Do I hear a second?
Second?
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. And you asked for 5
Madam
minutes?
Chair?
Ms. Bradford?
Regarding the policy that we've just left, board members have said that we've discussed this. We've discussed it through 2 generations now. Really, it's the 3rd time that I remember it coming forward. We've done a lot of due diligence on it, and so I move right now that this policy, 4351, not come before this board again for a minimum period of 12 months.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Ms. Justice?
I'm not even sure we have that authority. That's a new one on me. There's nothing in policy about that. You got your attorneys there.
Difficult.
Have you ever heard of something?
The attorneys. Either of the attorneys.
I'm stumped, but just as an aside, I'm trying to think if someone who voted in favor could always vote to reconsider.
Yeah.
You could, I mean, there are ways you can work around if there's a need to revisit an issue. I don't know that there's a way that you can completely foreclose it for a 12-month period. I just,
I'll withdraw my second.
that would be an airtight, I mean,
I would agree with that. If the board votes today to not discuss this or pick it up for 12 months, but then next month we decide in a unanimous vote to pick it up, I think it would be back on the table. Not sure what to say about the initial motion then.
Okay, so there is no longer a second? Or is there?
I gotta look.
Okay, that motion fails. Moving to proposed policy 6129, Mr. Wildebohr?